Hope everybody can hear me. I don't have my back up here, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. My purpose or my talk today is about rediscovering your purpose. I have some questions, and I'm an educator at heart. So I want you to write down things and take notes, but really listen to what I'm saying. I do have pictures and imagery, and they're important, but what's more important is that you see and that you feel and that you are present. And sometimes slides can be destructive or distracting or both. But I promise you, you'll get them. I promise you, you'll have them. I promise you that you'll see everything. So, everybody, just want you now to take a big, deep breath for me and release it. Take another one for me. In through your nose and out through your mouth. If you're sitting, I ask that you sit up straight now, put your feet on the floor, and just center yourself. This is a practice called centering, and it's maybe not something that we do consciously, but in an environment where you're learning something about yourself or you're asking yourself to be vulnerable, right? So that you can take in new information. It's important that you're present and that you're centered. So, my talk today is about rediscovering your purpose. This is so good. I so appreciate everything that Dr. Jen just went over. It is so lockstep with where I'm going to go next and what I'm going to talk about. It's amazing, right? It's a God thing. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me so you know who you're talking to um, by moving my slides on my end. Again, I know that you can't see them, but I can see them. First thing I need you to know is about the labels, right? These are what I call my approved labels. And then after you hear mine, I'm going to ask you to write down the ones that resonate with who you are, right? As a woman, as a sister in the service, right? There's no hood like the sisterhood. So this is a safe place. I am going to bring up terms and labels. These are not meant to be triggering, but they can be. What I need you to know that I am not trying to hurt you. I'm telling my story. So, in places where there are parallel, just know that we're connected. So, I'm going to throw out some of my labels and then I'm going to ask you to write down some of your labels. Now, the first set of labels I'm going to give you are my approved labels. These are the labels that are attached to me by birth or by whatever, by position, by profession, by whatever, and I received them. Okay. So, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. I'm an auntie. I'm a sailor. I'm a mentor. I'm a speaker. I'm a coach. I'm a change agent. I'm a friend. These are the approved list of labels that people use to define me. Now, understand this all comes in one package, right? It's a cute package, but one nonetheless. But the way that I interact with my husband is very different than the way I interact with my daughter. That's how I can be all these things at the same time. The way that I am with my daughter is very different than I am with my parents, where I act as a daughter. Got it? So there are also what I call your unapproved labels or temporary labels. Maybe these are things that people put on you that are by birth, by position, or whatever. And it's not so much that you don't accept them or receive them. They're just maybe temporary, right? Maybe they had a season and then they passed. So for me, I grew up as a preacher's kid. So sometimes when I go with my father and my mother to an event at church, then that label comes back to me. They still treat me as the preacher's kid. I refer to myself as my daddy's daughter, right? So they know who I am in context. I'm retired now. So I don't no longer refer to myself when I answer the phone as Captain Blassingame. Nobody's trying to hear that. That label no longer serves me at home or at my present place of employment. I no longer see myself as a victim of something that has happened to me. That doesn't serve me anymore. Sometimes when I'm in the right place and I'm talking to the right group about something that I've gone through, I may be called a survivor in that setting. Again, that's not something though that I wear with me to Ingles, Kroger, Publix, right? You won't know that necessarily unless I tell you. So this first reflective exercise based on our approved labels and our assumed labels and our appointed labels and our given, or people try to give you labels, just spend a few seconds writing down some of your labels, some of your roles, some of your positions, right? This goes back a little bit to some of what Dr. Jen talked about as well, about where you want to go in your next place. Maybe you want to write down the label of what you'd like to be. She talked about wanting to become a speaker. Maybe you too want to be a speaker. You might want to write your book. So you want to write yourself or be known as an author. Maybe you've tapped into some abilities that you had laid down before. Maybe you were a great and still are a gifted singer and you want to be a recording artist. I, in the future, want to be a host, a radio host, a podcast host of some kind. So it's not on my current list, but it's on my future list. So just spend a few seconds right now, take a deep breath, and write down some approved labels. You can categorize them if you like. You can write down some labels you want to shed yourself of. Again, this is a safe space. Maybe you're a wife. Maybe you want to be known as an ex-wife. Just saying, I'm not here to judge, right? That could be your future. If your kids are empty nesters and are gone, you'll always be their mom. But because you focus so much of your work around them, you want to be known as more than their mom. I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Because this is education. I won't go over. I'm gonna set my timer just to make sure that Melissa doesn't pull me off with a cane. That means disconnect my volume. And while you're doing that, I want to talk about the steps of rediscovery. So the 4 steps of rediscovery are identifying your first love. That's number 1. Number 2 is going to be association, right? It's going to be what are the core memories that are associated with that love. That's step number 2. And I'll go over these a couple of times because I know you're not reading, you're just watching me, which is good, right? And number 3 is going to be understanding. So what are the elements of your trauma response? How do you respond to trauma? These will make sense to you as we get to them. And then the 4th thing is going to be do something, right? I'm going to talk to you about doing something through art and with art in this path of rediscovery. But again, it's about doing something. So number 1 is identification. Number 2 is association. Number 3 is understanding. And number 4 is going to be doing. Okay, my first love is books. You can't see it in here. I won't terrorize you with my office, but I have built-in bookcases surrounding my office. I have bookcases in my closet, which is a walk-in closet. I have another extra bookcase. There are books all around me. They surround me. And while I saw myself as a reader, I still never saw myself as a writer. I had a trauma response with people taking my words or rewriting my words or using that dreaded red pencil or pen on my words. And so I said no to that. But the reason, but knowing something about reading being my first love, I had to think about why was that? Well, first, it opened up new worlds to me. I probably learned to read around 5 or 6 or so and started reading books pretty much thereafter. I literally don't know how I functioned in the world before I could read. Like once I could transport myself in that way, it was off to the races. So much so that a lot of my home, high school friends, people that I grew up with in my childhood home area, which is where I'm back to, only remember me with a book in my hand. This is the image of me they remember. Anywhere I could squirrel away to a corner, a quiet place and read a book, I would do it. I would always carry books with me in my purse, in my hand. And that's important. The first thing I remember about reading is that I'd read a word called nonchalant. And I was, I wanted to use it in a sentence. And I was young, I was probably 7. And I remember going into the kitchen with my mom and some of her sisters, and they were talking about something, and someone made a reference to a person or their attitude or way of being. And I remember thinking, oh, that's perfect. I was like, oh, she must have been acting real nonchalant. And so they looked at me like, okay, first of all, why are you in grown people's business? But more importantly, how did you know to use that word? They were fascinated. And that was really a core memory for me. I remember the feeling it gave me to use a word. At that time, I only knew it as a big word, but more importantly, it was a word in context to help shape a conversation. The second thing I remember in terms of words, my mother hates to read, but whenever we would go shopping, which she would do at least once or twice a week, and take me with her, is that I would read all the signs in the store about their refund policy, the sales policy, all of the things. And so before she went to the cash register, I would give her the rundown, like, Mama, you can't return that. That's got a red tag, or all sales are final, etc. And so that was the first time when I knew that I had a gift, skill, or talent that was important to someone else. So now I want you to think about your first love. So, what was your first love? If it wasn't books, if it wasn't doll houses, if it wasn't reconstruction, what is something that you did, or something even now that you do that you enjoy a lot? Just write it down. No judgment here. Again, and if you're in a room together, don't be looking at her paper. This is not a test or a quiz. There are no right or wrong answers. This is about you. So don't be cheating, and don't be judging. Just not for her, just for you. And then I guess the question I want to ask you is, do you remember when you first knew that you liked that feeling that it gave you? So I'm going to minimize my screen just a bit so that I can make sure that I can see instructions from the WOVA team and Melissa and her crew. This is what happens when you're old and you have to put your glasses down low and then bring them back up. Y'all know we veterans in here. Y'all already know. Y'all already know. Okay. So once you do that, then I want you to remember when you realized it could get something from others that you like whether it was they were going to pay you for it, or they were going to celebrate you for it, or they were going to, um, you know, they gave you something for it in terms of feedback that you like, because that's important, right? Okay. Let's take a few minutes to think about what is your first love. You don't have to tell anybody. You just have to know it for yourself. And now I want to talk about how maybe your core members can shape some decisions that you'll make. And I'll use my own quick two stories to highlight that, and then I'll give you time to think about yours. So if you imagine that your life journey is a water moving over pebbles, rocks, and a stream, you've kind of seen that concept before. And when it gets to small rocks, it just kind of goes over them. It really doesn't look or appear to be swayed by its presence at all. But when there are bigger rocks, huge obstacles, it either goes around them or it rushes over it violently or somehow, but it definitely changes the path the water was on. And so that's what core memories can do for you in terms of your careers and decisions. So when I was about 8 years old, I went to the pediatrician and I asked the pediatrician, she had all the kids on the wall, and I was trying to find myself every so often and I couldn't really see. So finally I got up the courage to ask her, where was my picture on the wall? Because she said these are all the babies she had brought into the world or were around at their birth. I'm in your office. I fit this description. Why am I not on? Where am I on this wall? So because I was a preemie, I was 2 pounds, a little over 2 pounds when I was born. She did not take a picture of me because she said, and her a direct quote was, "I didn't think you would make it." So I was deeply offended, um, because you don't get to decide. But after I made it, you still could have took a picture. Maybe it not have been day one, but it could be day 2063. Like, you could take a picture of me today and put me on the wall, right? The fact that I'm still not on your wall really offended me. So in that moment, I decided I was going to be a pediatrician because I didn't want any other kid to feel like that. Fast forward, I get to college and realize, oh no, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. A lot of that had to do with me and the Krebs cycle, another big obstacle in my way. And so that's how I ended up in the Navy, and or in ROTC, ended up just coming in as a general unrestricted line officer. And at the time, both of those seemed really traumatic and they seemed like really bad things that happened. But I don't regret being a science major. So my decision to become a pediatrician led me to a STEM degree, which served me well later. In the beginning, I thought it would be as a doctor. Looking back, I just needed that degree. I never envisioned becoming a naval officer, much less retiring in the military. That was not my career goal. but my decision to join ROTC because I needed the money to continue this education and help me pay for med school, right, is what led me to this career field that I wouldn't have ordinarily chosen, but turned out to be the biggest blessing. So again, these trauma responses, if you think about them, are called like your you fight, you flight, you freeze, you flop, or you find somebody to take care of you. They call that friending, are responses that we have to trauma. My two my typical response, honestly, in some cases, is to fight and make decisions to, you know, stand my ground, for lack of a better terminology. I don't do that in every case. And this is what I want to say to people in the room. If you fight, flight, freeze, flop, or find somebody to take care of you and you need the help, that's okay. Whatever choice you chose was the right choice, period. Don't let anybody tell you that you need to always, fight, or that you need to always flight, right? You get to choose your own responses. But the reflections that I want you to do right now is maybe think about, what is your typical response? What do you normally do? Do you fight? Do you flee or flight? Do you freeze up? Do you flop? Do you friend? And then this is where the ontology comes back in. I want you to connect to your emotions. What do you feel? Do you feel anger when you're having a trauma response? Do you feel fear? What is it? And not just what is the emotion, where is it? Do you feel it in your gut? That's important. Do your knees get weak? Do you lose sense of your spatial awareness? What happens to you? What happens to your body when you have a response? Then I want to ask you to ask yourself, is it serving you or is it costing you? When you are 6 years old and you hide because you need a safe place, no problem with that. You're undersized, you have no resources, you have nothing. Hiding is your best course of action. But if you still find that at 60 you still hide, the question I want you to ask yourself is why, and is it serving you or is it costing you? And so then the other thing is, if you don't have a therapist or you don't have a coach, and we can talk about the differences between the two, why don't you have one? Why do you want one? And just think about that for a season. Because later on in the talk, I'm going to talk to you about taking somebody on the journey, and you want to be ready for that. So now let's talk about these core memories. My connection to this idea actually came through a movie. Pixar had a movie a few years ago called Inside Out. My daughter was of age. We went to see this movie, and she said to me, "Mommy, you're sadness." I'm an extrovert. I'm usually pretty upbeat, a lot of happiness. My baby told me I was sadness. So the five emotions that they talk about in that movie are joy, sadness, disgust, rage, and fear. So of those five, joy, sadness, disgust, fear, or anger, which one is most like you? Just pick one. I'm going to share with you another graphic that lets you sort of combine them, right? So if you mix sadness with another emotion, it might be known as melancholy, right? And so the point of this exercise or this reflection is for you to really get in touch with who and how you're moving in the world. And if you like it like that, that's fine. So in this instance, because this trusted person, unprovoked, as children normally are, had already told me how she saw me. I wanted her to see me as joy, but she was seeing me and experiencing me as sadness. I needed to find a way to make those two come together and match, right? I wanted those two images to be congruent. I want it to be seen how I want it to be seen, is that, and I want that for you. And so this part, this is step number 4 now, we're already there, is about how do you do this? How did I kind of bring these things back together? And I will tell you, I did it through art. The beautiful thing about having a daughter and seeing the world through her eyes, is it changed me in ways that it wouldn't have changed me had I stayed single, or had I not married, or had I not had a kid, right? Not only did God bless me with a beautiful daughter, he blessed me with a daughter who was a complete opposite. And so I realized as a little girl that she was an artist. Remember, I'm a scientist. I'm a science major. I'm biology, biochem. I want to do the experiments. I want all the things. But now I have this art kid, and I felt like I couldn't relate to her. She would like to color, and I hated it. I'll be honest, I hate coloring. I hate coloring because you got to do it inside the lines. Like, they had rules, and then I didn't want to color the character she had. Another thing I will bring up about art, which was really interesting, was I had a one of my LDOs, my limited duty officers, meaning if you're not familiar with the Navy, she was prior enlisted and became an officer. So one of my division officers, as a department head on a carrier, loved cartoons, like kids' cartoons, and she would put them on in her office all the time, nothing but cartoons. Remember, as a kid, I didn't really watch cartoons like that. Once I could read, that's all I did. I watched some of the staples, but nothing like that. But after I had my daughter, two things happened. I grew an appreciation for cartoons. Cartoons are written by adults for adults, really, with some kid stuff in it. And so, movies, watching cartoons with my kid helped me tap back into my creativity as a human, as a person. So, the first thing I want you to know is that you are creative, whether you think you are or not. You were created by the creator, therefore, you are creative. I've tapped into something now called neurographic art, and I'll share that with you. It's a little like coloring, but better. Is where I do, and I have a journal for you to do that to help you. But it's a place where you can draw and use some of these reflective questions that I've given you, and then sort of draw and create something while you think through it in your subconscious. The other thing that I've been able to do is frame some of my pieces with my reflective questions in the back of it, right? So each one is different, it's distinct and individual to me, and I wanted to introduce that to you all. The other thing that I did is went to a conference for artist people. It's called Penner's Conference. Those of you who are in arts and crafts know what it is. Those who are not don't even know what that means. But it means you go to places, they give you supplies, and they teach you how to do things like this. So I went to a Penner's Conference this last weekend for 2 weekends, and I do about 15 different art projects. Um, in over a course of 2 days. That's because I'm an overachiever. But you can do as few or as many as you like. Last year was my first year, so this is my second year doing it, and it's a great place to be where you can be around people who can teach you how to do something you're not comfortable with. The other thing, and I think Dr. Jen mentioned it about keeping a journal and writing things down. If words is your thing, then let that be your choice. Do that. When my daughter, I mentioned to you, when I realized that I had an artist and I didn't want to color, I started taking jewelry classes. And one of the things I make now for myself are things that remind me of my service because I'm proud of it, but not in the traditional way. So in the military, in the Navy in particular, we can wear what we call our top three ribbons or something on our uniforms. And so I've made this wire wrap bracelet for myself that has the top three of my ribbons, right? The colors you can see. And so when I wear this or give it away to some of my girlfriends as an acknowledgement of our service without it being super military, for lack of a better word. But I did this on my own. This is a free kind of a deal, and supplies are available at Michael's. So if you have a women's group or something like that, I would just encourage you get together and do art things together that celebrate you and celebrate your service. And so finally, just going back to the question I offered you earlier about therapy or coaching or both, is to consider what they do and why they're different. So I am a coach now, an actual coach in a working on my certification. Even though a lot of us did this in uniform, particularly when we had younger service members assigned to us, we coach and mentor as just a part of our daily jobs. But something about getting the certification was a little different. It was a little bit humbling because there are some real ways and techniques to do it and do it in a way that's not harmful. So I walked down this path of coaching, but I specifically went into ontological coaching because it was making sure that the body emotions and the language that you use are congruent. And the reason this was important to me, because as a senior officer in the Navy, as a woman in a male dominated industry, my feelings really didn't matter. I mean, how many of us have said, fake it till you make it, never let them see you cry? I remember having a stateroom, thankfully, on a carrier. I had a single, and I remember there was a senior chief on the flight deck, and something was happening. And sometimes we get so mad, we're about to cry. And I could see she was in that space of, if she opens her mouth, she's probably going to bawl. She's probably going to be really angry with herself for that, sharing of that emotion. So I remember I slipped her my stateroom key and I said, go take care of your business and come on back, right? They give her a quiet space where she could go cry, scream, wash her face, and come back, right? So having spent 25 years in the military, my feelings started to not matter. Like, it didn't matter how I liked something or did something. It was, can you take charge? Can you carry out the plan of the day? Period. And so once I retired and people would ask me, how do you feel about something? I'd be like, I don't even know. I have no idea. And so I spent a 2-year journey trying to reconnect my emotions to my body and letting my language match. So, this when you ask somebody how they're doing and they're not doing well and they're mad at you, they say things like, I'm fine. Everything's okay. No, actually, no, it's not. I'm not getting that, right? The disconnect. So, as an ontological coach, I kind of help my clients bring those things back together. But the thing about coaching is think about a trip and a luggage and a suitcase. A therapist, you would go to a therapist to help you unpack the suitcase that you've been carrying around from childhood. It might have clothes that are too small, things that have been used. It might be because you lived in a warm climate or had swimsuits or whatever in it. The coach, though, I don't really care what's in the suitcase. I'm just asking you, do you need any of this for your next trip? If not, we're going to take it out and we're going to keep moving. The therapist might walk with you about each piece that's in there, what happened, why do you want to hold on to it, how, that kind of thing. So think about a therapist as helping you unpack the things that you've been through, whereas a coach is going to help transition you to where you want to go. You've already done it. You've created a chosen community. You've aligned yourself both with women and veterans. So keep doing that. And then the other thing I would just say is go find another sister. I have girlfriends that are not in this room because they don't celebrate their service. A lot of it has to do with some of the trauma and experiences they faced in uniform. I have a friend who has her DD 214 and that's it. She won't file a claim. She retired. She wants nothing to do with the VA. I have another friend who did only 4 years. She didn't even realize she's a veteran. She thought you had to be retired, right? But again, there are a lot of our sisters that are out there that are still needing service, and let's not leave them behind. There's no hood like a sisterhood, and there's no sisterhood like the Sisters in Arms. And so it's been a pleasure to be with you today. I promise you I have the WOVA app instructions. I'm going to upload these into the app before our panel, and I look forward to answering any questions you have later today. Thank you.
Thank you.